There is a sin few recognize, yet it devours countless Catholic souls daily, not with loud rebellion but with quiet indifference. It is the sin that allows mass attendance, daily prayers, even religious routines, yet kills the life of grace within. Its name is spiritual laziness, or as the Church names it, aesthesia. Pope Leo XIV warns, "The devil's greatest victory is not the sin that shocks, but the cold soul that no longer burns." Unlike pride or impurity, spiritual laziness is subtle. The Catholic still believes but no longer strives. He still attends but no longer hungers. He still prays but no longer trembles. The fire dims, but the soul feels no urgency to rekindle it. St. Thomas Aquinas defined aesthesia as a sorrow at the spiritual good. The soul no longer delights in the things of God. Prayer feels like labor. Scripture becomes dry. Mass becomes routine. Works of mercy feel burdensome. Slowly, the soul prefers comfort, distraction, and rest over effort, sacrifice, and spiritual growth. Pope Leo XIV teaches, "The soul infected by aesthesia drifts not into apostasy, but into sleep, and the sleeping soul is easy prey." The modern world feeds this sloth constantly. Entertainment, endless scrolling, comfort-seeking, obsession with relaxation, all train the Catholic to avoid anything that demands effort. Even well-meaning Catholics say, "I'll pray when I feel ready. I'll fast when life is easier. I'll confess when I have time." But holiness never arises from convenience. The saints did not feel ready. They chose. They rose while tired. They prayed while dry. They served while wounded. Spiritual laziness kills not because it shocks, but because it suffocates. It chokes the very hunger that once drove the soul toward heaven. The enemy has learned that in our time, open rebellion is no longer necessary. He only needs to keep Catholic souls constantly distracted, entertained, and busy with lesser things. Spiritual laziness feeds not only on apathy but on endless diversion. Pope Leo XIV teaches, "When the soul is too busy for God, it is already drifting from Him." The modern Catholic often feels overwhelmed. Endless work demands, social obligations, digital noise, scrolling through meaningless images for hours. Even moments meant for prayer become filled with the temptation to check notifications, respond to messages, or allow wandering thoughts to rule. St. Alphonsus Liguori warned, "The devil does not always push you into sin. Sometimes he only keeps you from prayer." The soul comforts itself with shallow excuses. "God understands my schedule. I'll pray tomorrow. I'll read scripture next week. I'll start serious spiritual discipline when life slows down." But life rarely slows. The tomorrow that never comes becomes the grave of many vocations. Pope Leo XIV warns, "The greatest tragedy is not when the soul refuses to pray, but when it postpones prayer indefinitely." In this way, the soul remains outwardly Catholic while growing interiorly empty. The mind still knows the faith, the lips still recite prayers, but the heart no longer thirsts. And slowly, grace is choked by neglect. The saints battled this warfare differently. St. Francis Delaware Sales advised, "Half an hour's prayer each day is essential, except when you are busy. Then an hour is needed." The more the soul drifts, the harder it becomes to return. The longer prayer is delayed, the heavier it feels to begin again. This is precisely what the devil desires. Not open rebellion, but exhaustion, heaviness, and the quiet death of desire. But even now, one whispered prayer, even weak, even tired, is enough to reignite the spark. For God never grows tired of beginning again with the soul who returns. At the heart of spiritual laziness lies a frightening reality. The soul no longer desires God. The longing for union with Christ fades into a distant memory, replaced by earthly comforts, entertainment, and passing pleasures. The soul still fears hell but has lost its hunger for heaven. Pope Leo XIV warns, "The soul that no longer desires sanctity is already half dead." The saints were not holy because they were naturally strong. They burned because they desired. Even in dryness they whispered, "Lord, increase my desire." They knew that desire itself is a gift, one that must be guarded, fed, and stirred daily. St. Augustine cried, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." But many Catholics today live spiritually numb. They attend Mass without awe, receive communion without trembling, recite prayers without attention. They no longer weep over sin or yearn for holiness. The eternal has become distant. The world's noise drowns out the voice that once called them higher. Pope Leo XIV teaches, "Satan's work is finished not when you hate God, but when you forget your need for Him." This numbness often disguises itself as balance, as maturity, even as humility. "I'll never be a saint. I'm doing my best. God understands. But behind these words often lies a soul that has settled for mediocrity. The saints refused to settle. They desired more, not more comfort but more of God. They longed to love Him completely, to suffer for Him, to empty themselves for His glory. This holy restlessness made them dangerous to hell. Saint Teresa of Lisieux, though hidden in her cloister, declared, "I choose all. Not part of God, not a little virtue, but everything." When desire returns, even weakly, grace floods in. The soul that whispers, "Lord, I want to want you again," awakens the furnace of love. For God responds not first to perfection, but to desire. One of the most subtle lies that sustains spiritual laziness is the thought, "I am not ready." The soul convinces itself that it cannot fully surrender to God until it feels stronger, holier, more prepared. And so, days turn to years as the invitation of grace remains unanswered. Pope Leo XIV teaches, "Satan does not fear your weakness, he fears your surrender." The saints did not wait until they were worthy. They understood that readiness is not a requirement, only willingness. Holiness is not built on the soul's strength, but on God's mercy. To delay conversion because one feels unworthy is to fall into a false humility that masks pride and fear. Saint Francis Delaware Sales wrote, "The enemy troubles us not because we are weak, but because we despair of God's mercy." This hesitation gives birth to a dangerous cycle. The soul remains lukewarm, avoiding deeper prayer, avoiding serious examination of conscience, avoiding frequent confession, all because it believes sanctity belongs to others, to priests, to nuns, to saints of the past. Pope Leo XIV warns, "The Church is not built by saints who were ready, but by sinners who dared to begin." Even now, God does not ask for perfection at the start. He asks for consent. A simple, whispered yes can unleash torrents of grace. The sinner who falls yet rises daily grows stronger than the one who waits forever to feel worthy. The devil whispers, "Wait until you've conquered your sin before you come to God." But Christ calls, "Come to me now and I will heal you." Saint Padre Pio counseled countless souls with one simple command: begin again. There is no better time. No future moment will make the soul more ready than this one. The battle against spiritual laziness is won the moment the soul dares to move, even with trembling steps, toward God's open arms. Another face of spiritual laziness disguises itself as good intention, the endless planning of future holiness. The soul imagines great spiritual disciplines, devotions, and works of charity, someday. But today it remains passive, content with mere thoughts. Pope Leo XIV warns, "The soul that dreams of holiness while delaying small obedience remains chained." The Catholic promises, "Soon I'll start praying the rosary daily. Soon I'll begin reading scripture. Soon I'll fast seriously. Soon I'll return to confession." The good desire deceives because it never bears fruit. The will remains frozen, content with imagining rather than doing. Saint Josemaria Escriva spoke firmly, "Now, not tomorrow, is the time for you to live holiness." The devil rejoices when Catholics fill journals with spiritual goals but never rise early to pray. When they buy books on saints but never open them. When they speak of reform but continue delaying. This paralysis feeds pride. The soul comforts itself with the illusion of progress while remaining stagnant. Pope Leo XIV teaches, "Sanctity grows not in grand resolutions but in small, hidden obedience repeated daily." The saints were not made by dramatic gestures, but by steady, ordinary faithfulness. Rising for prayer even when tired. Returning to confession quickly after each fall. Speaking kindness when anger stirs. Choosing silence over gossip. Choosing purity over indulgence. Choosing surrender over control, every single day. Spiritual laziness dies not through dramatic victories, but through daily battle. Saint Teresa of Lisieux understood, "Holiness consists simply in doing God's will always in every little thing." The Catholic who waits for a perfect moment to begin will never move. But the one who begins, now, today, enters the stream of grace that transforms weakness into strength. In the eyes of heaven, the smallest act done today is greater than the grandest resolution delayed until tomorrow. At the core of spiritual laziness lies the rejection of duty, not spectacular failure but quiet negligence. The soul no longer rebels openly but tires of small responsibilities. Prayer becomes mechanical. Mass attendance becomes habit. Charity becomes burden. The joy of duty fades into indifference. Pope Leo XIV warns, "When duty becomes tiresome, love is already growing cold." The Catholic life is built on daily duties: morning offering, prayer, mass, confession, acts of mercy, patience with family, faithfulness in work. None are glamorous. Most are hidden. But together they form the ladder to heaven. The devil knows this, and so he attacks not the great works but the daily ones. Saint Teresa of Avila taught, "Perfection does not consist in great things, but in doing the little things with great love." Spiritual laziness whispers, "It's not a sin to skip today. It's not serious to relax your efforts just this once." But these small compromises multiply. The soul weakens slowly like a muscle never exercised. Pope Leo XIV teaches, "The soul that neglects small duties will one day fall easily in great ones." The saints guarded their daily discipline as fiercely as they resisted mortal sin. Their greatness lay not in constant ecstasy, but in unshakable fidelity to simple acts. They did not ask how little they could do, but how much they could offer in every moment. Saint John Vianney, exhausted by constant confessions, whispered, "Rest? We will rest in heaven." The modern world fears boredom, craves stimulation, and despises quiet perseverance. But holiness thrives precisely in the unseen labors, in praying when tired, forgiving when frustrated, working when unnoticed, loving when unthanked. Spiritual laziness dies when the soul embraces its duty not as burden, but as love in action. The Catholic who conquers the small daily battle soon finds himself strengthened for every greater trial. Another silent weapon of spiritual laziness is comparison, the constant measuring of one's holiness against others. The soul says, "At least I pray more than most. At least I attend Massachusetts. Others are worse." And with this comfort, the desire for true sanctity quietly dies. Pope Leo XIV warns, "The soul that compares itself to the lukewarm makes peace with mediocrity." The saints never compared themselves to others. They compared themselves to Christ. Before his perfect love, they saw their need for deeper humility, greater sacrifice, more profound surrender. It was not fear that drove them, but longing for union with the one who gave everything. Saint Francis of Assisi wept near the end of his life, saying, "We have done nothing yet." This was not despair but holy hunger. The closer the saints drew to God, the more they saw how far his love still called them. But the spiritually lazy soul avoids this gaze. It seeks comfort by looking sideways at others who pray less, sacrifice less, serve less. In this way, pride disguises itself as peace. The soul remains lukewarm, content with minimal effort, blind to its stagnation. Pope Leo XIV teaches, "Holiness is not measured by how far ahead you stand of others, but by how deeply you enter the heart of Christ." The devil encourages this subtle pride. He whispers, "You are already good enough. You're better than most. You have no need to change." And so year after year the soul drifts, not openly rebellious but quietly withering. Saint Teresa of Lisieux offers a different cry. "I choose all." She desired not partial sanctity, not enough holiness to feel safe, but the fullness of God's love, whatever the cost. The cure for comparison is not self-contempt, but radical surrender, to fix the eyes solely on Christ, and to beg each day for the grace to love him more. For in the eyes of heaven, mediocrity is not safety. It is spiritual death. The soul that conquers spiritual laziness does not become perfect overnight. It simply refuses to stop rising. It prays when dry, confesses when weak, begins again after every fall. This soul, humble, persevering, surrendered, terrifies hell more than the most dramatic conversions. Pope Leo XIV proclaims, "The soul that refuses to give up becomes untouchable to the enemy." The saints were not free from temptation, distraction, or fatigue. They battled dryness, doubts, and failures. But they never surrendered to spiritual laziness. Their secret was not strength, but relentless beginning. They whispered daily, "Today I rise again." Saint Padre Pio promised, "The devil fears the soul that perseveres in prayer." The modern Catholic often waits for motivation, for emotion, for inspiration. But true sanctity begins when the soul chooses God without waiting to feel ready. The simple act of kneeling once more, of opening Scripture again, of returning to confession once more, these daily victories crush spiritual sloth. Pope Leo XIV teaches, "The lazy soul waits for perfect conditions. The holy soul creates them through fidelity." Heaven pours extraordinary grace upon ordinary faithfulness. The soul that chooses its small duties each day, the rosary whispered in fatigue, the Mass attended with focus, the sacrifice offered in silence, accumulates treasures that hell cannot steal. Saint Josemaria Escriva wrote, "Persevere, even when everything seems barren. God is preparing his harvest." The soul that rises daily in prayer, in confession, in hidden obedience, slowly becomes a blazing fire. Not because it is faultless, but because it refuses to settle. And when such souls multiply, the Church herself rises again in power. Pope Leo XIV concludes, "Hell fears not the many who speak of holiness, but the few who simply live it. Let your soul become one that terrifies hell. Begin again, today."